All right, we should be live. Now I just need to record.
So we
Alright.
lost Jack, didn't we? Looks like he was on and then he's gone. Okay. So do I have, I don't have a quorum. Now I do have a quorum. Kelly's here. And there's Jack. Good. Hey, Jack. You with your mom? Okay. Welcome everybody to the Albany Common Council Public Safety Meeting. Today is 4/20, and just want to mention that. And with me tonight, we have committee member Alfredo Ballerin, Jack Flynn, Kelly Kimbrough, Council Member Jenny Farrell, and Council President Corey Ellis. Welcome everybody. Ethan has told me there is no public comment. Nobody's signed up for it. So we will be able to work on the document that we have up here. You know, I was thinking before this meeting started about the significance. Today is 4/20, and just thinking about all the innocent people when they were guilty of something, but we had laws out there and how many lives were ruined. And now today, because marijuana was illegal, and today it is legal. And so it's important that when we do pass laws and change laws that we understand that for every action, there's a reaction. As famous scientist Isaac Newton said, and that's my new philosophy in life, that everything I do impacts others, and that us as a society has to realize that we can't force other people to follow what our beliefs are. It has to be a democratic process where we work things out, and that's what's important with this local law C. That we are here, we are going to be making changes and trying to make changes, and it is going to impact a lot of people in a lot of ways that we do business. And you know, I hope that we come up with something that is justifiable, equitable, and right for the city at this time, because things do change as time goes on. But the time is right now. And so one thing I wanted to get out of the way, I've been with the previous meetings, I like to talk to people by their first names. It's just much easier to move around. And I just want to make sure that especially committee members are okay with that. And if not, we'll go back to the council member and then the last name. So is there any problem with that? Okay, see Alfredo saying no, and Kelly saying no, and Jack, good. And Jenny too. Thanks, Jenny. Okay, so Ethan, you want to bring up local law C on the shared screen? And folks out there, we are, the governor did extend the emergency order to May 15th. And that's why we decided to do this meeting virtual. And we do know the COVID cases are rising in Albany. And I think I've expressed before, I like doing stuff virtual. I think it gets more citizens involved. And you can go back and actually watch this on either YouTube or on some of the other devices that we have. And we are now joined by Council Member Derek Johnson. Welcome, Derek. Okay, so I was thinking about tonight's meeting, and if there was going to be public comment, I was going to ask people to talk about what areas of local law C that they like or dislike, and if they support the concept. But since we don't have any public comment, I will start with committee members, and I'd just like to get a rough idea where we're going with this, what your thoughts are, and what areas that we need to work on to make this move. This is, like I said, a 10-page document. There's a tremendous amount of information in here, and most likely will be changed. So, Alfredo, you're right next to me, so I'm going to ask you, what do you see with local law C? Do you think it's, as it is, do you want to see changes, or, the concept of having a commission? Just want to get a rough idea what you're thinking.
Thank you, Tom. I've got, like I mentioned at the last meeting, I've got a couple of concerns that I want to have to get cleared up. There's some concepts and ideas that I think sound good. I just want to know if we can afford it. And if we could afford it, how would it be structured? Then the other thing I'd want to see is, so that's one concept. You've got the commission, but then you've got the actual department. So I know at one point we were talking about splitting that, and that may be a way to move forward, so that we're no longer talking about the budget and those, and we're just talking about the commission. And if we did that, that's fine. And if we didn't, that's fine either, because the department is much more much more of a real change. And not that the commission wouldn't, but you're talking about what people would see when they call the police, and that's what I'm always focused on. How does what we do here affect individuals on the ground level? So, I'm okay with having those conversations. I just want to make sure that when we're having it, we are speaking realistic about what we could actually afford to do. And that's why I think it's important to bring in people from the budget department to really tell us what could we afford to do and what couldn't we, because there's some good ideas here, and it's important for us to have those conversations. The other issue I have is the, transferring so much authority to this entity. I have some concerns about that. We've all seen what happened when we transferred so much authority with the planning board. And, I think all of us, or most of us, have had some issues with some of the decisions that have been made, and some of the, sense of feelings or reality that, public concerns are not always being addressed, by that entity. So those are my two biggest concerns. And then once you get those, there's some other smaller stuff that I think we'd have to, look at, like it has it so that the force, so that so the public safety officer would go and go for domestic issues. I would still want to have a police officer go for those type of issues. So there's some more in the weeds that are smaller detailed that I'd want to have us work out and figure out, because I think and I'd also want to bring in people from the police department to give us some more of their input, so that we make sure whatever we do structure, whatever we do set up, it benefits the people on the ground when they make that phone call, and doesn't have a negative reaction. But that's probably more time than you probably wanted me to take.
No, this is good, and we'll get back to it. I've taken notes, so I got some of the high points that you've said. So, but I just want to go through all the committee members, and then through the council members, and the council president, and want to get all the talk, and then we can kind of hash it out and see where we're going. But let me keep doing that first, and then we'll come back and you'll understand why I want to do it like that in a few minutes. Kelly, do you mind giving us what you think?
Yeah, I support the idea. Having worked with the police, there's some, the idea of turning over the authority. I mean, the community should get to say how their police functions. And I know with all the reforms, we're trying to get away from sending police to everything. And that's part of our problem. We have issues that are non-police issues that we send police to. So I like the idea of this, and I think the way you have us going about this right now with getting from committee members how they think of this or view this or what they approve of or not is a good idea. But I actually, from where I'm sitting, I'd like to hear what the sponsors actually, their vision, I mean, they put this forth, they structured this, it's their idea. I think we start from their idea, and then, because I mean, of course it matters what I think because I'm a committee member, but again, there's a group of council members that sponsored this, brought this forth, that I think we need to hear from also. I think that's how we should have actually started.
Well, I messed up, but I am planning to get to them. They, just stay tuned. Once I go, I do want to, because of the procedural that we've normally in the past have done is, all on committee members. It does, it'll all work out.
Yep.
I promise you. But
Yep.
and again, I just wanted to get if there's, my biggest fear, and I'm going to just put this right out there, is that if we have somebody who says, I want to see this change, I want to see that change, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, and if we work everything out and get everybody to agree, and then when it comes up for a vote, they vote no,
that never happens.
Oh yeah, right. But
No.
we'll continue on.
I get it.
But
I get it.
okay, and I'll circle back to you too, Kelly, because I want to know.
And then I'm sorry, Chandra. Then also how the CPRB interfaces. There's some responsibilities that there's it appears that there may be overlap, and so that stuff has to be worked out. So I think I'd like to hear what the sponsors envision, in more detail. We already got the general for this, the general idea of what they're trying to accomplish, which I'm behind 100%. But more specific. We need more specifics. At least I do. So okay. I'll be quiet with that.
No, that's good. Jack, how do you feel? And can you do me
I kind of agree with Kelly on a lot. My biggest concern is, we all agree that there needs to be police reform, and there's no question about it. The question is this the answer? My issue is we've got so many boards and committees. We got ACPAC, we got CPRB, we got Snow. My issue is we've got so many, people at the table, but we need to achieve the ultimate goal. And is this the ultimate goal when you have, like I said, this is another board or commission where we're going to have 9 members? We're already having issues getting 15 people or 20 people for ACPAC. You understand? We already have people with issues now. So my question is this the issue? Do we need to bring all those parties involved to discuss this legislation of CPRB, ACPAC members? So that's one of my concerns, that let's get it right and moving forward. The whole police department, the whole reform, which we all agree needs some type of reform. I do agree that I thought we were going to have people from the budget to come in today's meeting to discuss the finances. So I thought that was what we were going to do today. But I also agree with Kelly. I'd like to hear all the sponsors, what their vision is. Councilman Johnson, Anane, yourself, Romero, what they want this to be. And then we can start. I have questions for them personally, to be honest with you, on each little section that I wrote down in my notes of, whoever wants to answer them in reference to the legislation. So that's my take on the whole situation.
Yeah, and Jack, it was my fault. I thought this meeting was next week. And the only reason I knew to be here is I saw Ethan's email this morning. I'm on vacation this week and my mind is just gone. So I do apologize. I will get the budget office in, and I plan on doing that the next meeting. So definitely we'll do that. Let me just see who else is here. If there's no other. So I'm going to go then to Jenny. You're right there. So what are your thoughts?
I do have them, but I would honestly defer, since I'm not one of the sponsors. I would happily defer. I think that Derek is one of the sponsors, so I would defer to him. And I also, no one's surprised I have an opinion, but I can wait until after the sponsors share theirs.
Okay, no worries. And we also have Council President, well, Corey here also, who is the main driving force, and we'll talk to him also. So Derek, do you mind jumping in and give us your thoughts? And you probably heard Kelly say that, it's important to hear, because you are the main sponsor of this legislation, what your thoughts are, the good stuff. Do you want to see any changes in the way it's written right now? And what do we hope to accomplish?
Well, thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Okay.
Really this was all inspired by people's call for police reform. And are we going to get it right the first chance? We hope so, but that isn't always the case. So what we're looking at, and coming to these meetings is just to hear feedback from the committee members. I thought our goal was to go through it and address people's concerns. And so when we went through it, we addressed people's concerns, and now it's being, thrown back. What we're looking to do is get it out of committee and get it to the people. Our job is to respond to the concerns that the people bring in our directions. And, what this resolution is an attempt to address concerns that we've had, for a long time in our community in terms of, mental health calls. I'm not going to keep on bringing up my cousin's name, but Dante Ivy, I live with that every single day. So I have personal motivation because, when you wake up, you don't want to see another family be in that situation. From that perspective, as a elected official, we don't want to see the city be in that position. And Albany, and when you listen to the history of Albany, we've always been the first to do stuff. A lot of things. It wouldn't be the first time we did something ahead of everyone else. So our goal is to create a different path to some of this police calls. And then when you think about how is this going to be paid, well, obviously, if we're taking responsibilities away from the police, then that means that we can start talking about diverting some of that funding that goes to the police department. If I'm corrected, I think they had about $56 million last year, and so there's room for us to be able to fund this new thought process right there. And I guess what we need to do is we need to come to an agreement on the language. If we can come to an agreement on the language, then we can start working and looking at the numbers. But in this point, what we're looking for is to put forth. We're putting this resolution forth, once again, to show the people that we're listening to them, and when you come and you share your ideals with us and your thoughts and your concerns, that we're going to do everything in our power to make the necessary changes. So I think Council President Ellis could follow up from his perspective.
That's a good lead in. Corey, do you want to talk about, what your thoughts are? And why I brought up about the committee first, and I want to address that right now, is when we had our last meeting, there was a lot of discussion whether we needed to have a separate department or not of public safety. And, trying to get everything worked out. If we are going to have a Department of Public Safety, that's going to definitely change the budget numbers. So we need to know what we're dealing with before I can start asking folks how we're going to pay for this or what exactly that we're looking for. So I'm going to just give it back to you, Corey, and that was my concern, is can we get this? Do we need to do a lot more work on this?
Thank you. First, I'll get back to the intent of the commission. The intent of the commission came by because of the police reform recommendations. The community did not believe or trust and council members at that time did not believe or trust that those recommendations would be implemented. They did not believe or trust that those recommendations would be transparent on how they're being implemented. That's where the commission idea came from. Even people on the commission, even people on the reform package stated this as well. The commission was to be formed to be a separate entity that will help oversee policies, make recommendations of policy changes, and also to work with the police department on some of those issues that are non-police issues that could be possibly solved in a different way. The community did not want the police department to do it by themselves anymore. That's what the purpose of the commission has always been, is to be an advise, oversee policy, where a place where people, when they say, can we understand what the police policies are? They don't have to contact the police department. They can contact commission. The police department will come up with their policies. The commission could make recommendations on policies, and they could adhere to those recommendations or not. The commission was going to be another view, a separate view, and where we decoupled that. That's how it started. Now, the public safety department, I'm glad Mr. Ballin brought it up. Department, I put that in there just because a council member put it in there last time. I would agree. I think we should amend this local law and take that out and have that discussion number 7, because it's a separate entity. That way council members can decide whether or not we do want a public safety department. And once we put that in there, because of certain functions of the public safety department, it gave the commission more power and authority because of the public safety department. And that's why it's very important. And Councilman, I agree. Committee members, we need to know what the issues are so we can address them and answer them. I cannot answer any issues that I don't know about. Mr. Jack pointed out, we have ACPAC, we have CPRB, we have ACPAC was not constituted by the council. ACPAC was an idea by the police department. 2, ACPAC members were a part of crafting this local law. So they were there. We had CPRB members there crafting this local law. ACPAC could be an advisory function with the commission if we choose to go that way. You don't get members on ACPAC because they have no power, they have no authority, and the police department does not have a legal right to give them any information they request. They can if they want, they don't have to. That's why people don't participate at ACPAC. See, I heard someone said there's overlap of CPRB. I'd like to know where that's written in the law so we can look at it and change it. If there's overlap. Like to see that. There's overlap. Yep, okay, that's overlap. We don't need that part. So when we look at it, I think it's clear. The commission was put together to make sure and have oversight of the police recommendations that those citizens put together. That was the purpose. It's also the purpose of having that commission have the police policies and procedures on hand, so people did not have to go and try to pull it from the police department and have this conversation. Well, what is your part? Well, we'll get back to you. Also, the commission would also be looking over the police department recommendations, looking over the reform recommendations, say, okay, the citizens have said they want this to be a part of your police policy. Why isn't it? The commission will sit down with the police department, because when you keep saying the police department needs to come in, the police department and the commission will sit down and figure out together what duties and operations that you guys see that can be taken out of the police department. That's non-police issues. And if that's the case, now we can figure out how do we go about that. But it seems like we don't want citizens to have that conversation, because that's what the commission will do. So when we talk about whether police is going to show up at a call, the commission and the police department will figure that out. They will be able to say, commission, we don't think it's safe if a domestic call comes in. That is a call where, great, perfect. The police department will say, we think these calls, we should not be answered. Commission's job is to come up with recommendations, looking at best practices, looking at how other people have done it, say, oh, so if the police department on this is probably where we want to go to make sure that happens. That is the purpose of the commission. That's always been the purpose. We're getting in the weeds because we don't know what council members are objecting to. We heard some, but we can't fix legislation. We can't agree on legislation if you're not having a conversation. And I think, Mr. Hole, you're correct. We don't want to be going through carving up a local law and then have people vote against it. What you're wasting our time. You're wasting the citizen, not just our time, citizens' time. If you don't agree with the totality of the law, I understand. But if we go in, there's certain points that because of the people who craft this local law, they might say, no, we want that to stay in there. Stays in, council members vote against it. That's understandable. Understandable. But we don't want to make changes and answer all the questions and make those changes and people still vote against it. I don't think that's fair to the citizens. I don't think that's fair to council members because we want to operate on there's compromise with every law. So when other council members on this committee or council members say, yep, you know what, you're right, let's rework that, or that wasn't an intent of that language, you're right, let's change it. That's progress, and that's how we get to where we get the commission to where we're trying to get it to be. And so it's hard to, I think I've been very clear on continuing to say this, because the people have spoken. The pure oversight of just having the mayor's office, whoever's in that office, just having the mayor completely have total oversight over the police department over centuries have not seemed to produce things that the citizens have wanted. That's why we're where we are today. So just saying the mayor's department should have total control, that's always been that case. And it's not gotten better. So why not let citizens it's not a large role, play a role in that policy and procedure process. How do we go about things, making suggestions and seeing how that functions. And that's it. But once I'll state this and when I close and end this, there's a lot of things in there because it was under public safety department. We pull that out, some of those duties of the commission will change because of how the law was written and how the public safety department was written. So it will look somewhat different, but I think the premise, it doesn't change. Thanks.
Thank you, Corey. We've been joined by Council Member Megan Keegan and Council Member Gabriela Romero. And just to let you know, we started the meeting off. What I'm asking is, I'm going around it first to committee members and then to council members to talk about what you see, local law C in its present state. If you see changes that are needed, what's good in it, what's bad in it. And so that we understand moving forward so we can do changes if we need it, how to address it. So I'll start off with you, Megan. I know you sent a long letter and I'll be honest with you, it was very long, but.
I still want to weigh in, Tom, just whenever is fine, but.
Okay, I'll come back. I'll circle back right after Gabriella. Do you want to do it now?
Gabriella is actually one of the sponsors too, so you might.
Sure. All right. So go ahead, Megan.
I realize I did send a really long letter, but this was also a pretty lengthy piece of legislation. And I think that letter did kind of go piece by piece through different sections where I had concerns and questions. And I think that we've already kind of gone over sort of my concerns with how the committee is set up and what it has oversight of, and whether that really provides a voice for the people, having an influence over the department and the way that it's structured to death. And then there's just some other areas. I think I talked a little bit in there about, if they're going to have authority over fines, I think that needs to be really flushed out, because there are things that we don't necessarily have local control over. And that, what do we mean by fines? Is that fines levied by DGS? Is it fines levied by codes? Is it fines levied by parking? What's already structured in VTL and criminal procedure law? Because I think it's really important, if the community is going to vote on this, that they understand where our limitations are. And the language should reflect that. There are also some other pieces in there. For example, we talk about child welfare. Child welfare is a very, very specific term. I'm not sure what the intent of that section was. I know in my comments, I talked about the fact that that is really something that is under the authority of the county. So I don't know if people intended for that to be juvenile crimes, which would require different language, or if they meant child welfare cases in which there would be police involvement. That needs to be kind of fleshed out and really specifically looked at. And then there's another sort of section of that law that gets into establishing programs around clean injection sites, substance abuse treatment, that again are things that we would typically see the funding and establishment come either through Oasis or the county. And so I think it's a really big question for us as a city, without really kind of any state or federal funding coming through for that. How would we really do that within our budgetary limitations? And so I think there's a couple sections in there that, if they stay as is, there needs to be a conversation with the county, and perhaps even with the state, as to what that would look like and what our options are. Because again, I think a lot of my concerns are that this law promises a lot of things that we may not be able to provide. And I don't want to see us in a position where we're once again, quote unquote, doing police reform that doesn't come to fruition. I think that's really disingenuous, given the concerns that the community has. I think while Corey and I may seem to be at odds in this, I think we're both coming from the very same place of concern, but perhaps looking at it from different points of view.
I totally agree, especially with what you just said. I totally agree. I think that's how the language is worded. And when you look at it, like some people, I agree with you. And I think I know we're going to get there, because I'm jotting down the notes and I'm like, okay, that does make sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I want people to understand that even though I submitted like really lengthy comments, it's coming from a genuine place. I want to see a lot of the components of this legislation come to fruition here in Albany. I think there are a lot of really great ideas. I think that they will lend towards really great improvements for our community. I want to make sure that we have the ability to do it. I want to make sure we have the ability to fund it, and fund it sustainably. And I don't want this to be another empty promise. And that's one of the reasons why I was so critical in looking at this. And I hope that you all can kind of understand and respect that, I'm not coming from a place where I'm poo-pooing the idea. I really want to genuinely see us be impactful in what we're doing.
Yes. Well, Ms. Keegan, before you got on, we did talk about, I did say a lot of the language was about what would be under a public safety department. And some of those issues, like you would say, okay, would the public safety department be looking at, like you said, the juvenile crowd instead of child welfare? So once we, we'd like to amend this local law to pull out the public safety department piece, then a lot of that stuff would go, in a separate committee, public safety committee, to talk about those things. That's what I said earlier, because once you pull out the public safety department, a lot of that other stuff goes away. And it was put in as the writer of not me, but people were looking at, okay, if you have a public safety department, this is what we hope they would look at, right? So it's encompassed in one law, but if you take out and separate them, The commission, you will see, serves a different function. And then the council could really talk about the public safety department, if we want it, blah, 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 how much it costs, and would we want it to function like this? So
Yeah, and
that's why I said I really understand.
That's why
Yep.
I was kind of like child welfare, like for someone like
Yes.
me who worked in child welfare, when I see that term, it's kind of like, are we getting into the weeds of when the department would make a referral? Because that would impede upon social services law in New York State. Or were they intending to talk about cases involving persons in need of supervision?
That's right.
And juvenile crimes, which you need to use different terminology because child welfare is a very specific term under federal and state law. That's all.
Yep.
And we appreciate, believe me, Megan, I really appreciate everything that you're saying. And again, we got a law out here, and the way we're trying to get to the end point, and there's different roads that we can take to get there. And I think we all want to be at the end, but to get there, we got to map out exactly how we're going to do it. So, and that's what I wanted this discussion to start with tonight. So I wanted to let Gabriella jump in, and then we'll go back to Jenny.
Thanks, Tom. I think that Corey brought up a good point to separate the public safety department from this legislation. I support that. Corey also said a few things about the spirit of this legislation and the inception of this legislation. And I think we may all be on the same page about what needs to be done. It's just a matter of logistics of how we want to do it. Something that I suggested at the last public safety committee meeting was publicly meeting with the different groups of the police reform collaborative to figure out how their expertise and their research and their discussions can fit into this legislation or fit into what our end goal is going to be when we reimagine public safety or create a public safety commission. And I still think that would be a good idea for us going forward as we parse through this. So I would love to help facilitate some of those meetings or invite them or organize a way to publicly have these conversations, because I think that could organize where we want to go next.
Great. I appreciate that. And we're going to try to schedule 2 more meetings. Like to do them virtual. The order ends on May 15th. And I want to try to get Sonia in, so we're going to try to get the days that she's available. I'm going to go ahead to Jenny, go back.
So I want to reiterate what I said at the last public safety committee, which I think and similar to what Gabriella just said, but I think it makes the most sense to break this into subject areas and then bring in people with the expertise on those subject areas, including the police collaborative. That was a huge process that a lot of us went through with it. And I know that at least with my subgroup, they would happily come back in and they would love to talk about it and love to be involved in the discussion. And then just to kind of touch on what Council President Ellis said, I think that he really said it well, that there is a huge desire from the people of Albany to see police reform. So I think that the process of going through this, especially in subject matter and especially bringing the relevant stakeholders and the collaborative members through each piece would really get us to a spot that would be true police reform. Some of those pieces are happening, some of them aren't, but this would actually be a process that we could go through where we would really be able to act on them. And I would just say, again, to reiterate this, I think that the budget is one of the most important parts, but we don't know what we're paying for yet. So bringing the budget office in when we don't even know what we're asking for, I mean, I don't know that it makes sense. And I think Sonia's on the public safety committee. So I think that her voice in this, I value her voice in this regardless, but in terms of actually paying for it, we need to know what we're paying for. You can't create a budget in a vacuum. And to ask our budget office to create then it's like you're just tossing out a number. It's going to cost $5 million. I don't know, because you don't know what you're actually paying for. And so I would actually argue that that should come last. Figure out what you're paying for first, because it could be something where maybe it would make the most sense to subcontract this piece out. Maybe, and that would cost X amount and it would be less than they expected when you said it. Or maybe it's something that this piece would actually cost a lot more, but until you go through that process and bring the stakeholders in, bring the different people that have already spent a lot of time on it, you're not going to know what you're trying to price out. And so I think it's an essential part of the process. I think it comes at the end of the process, though.
I agree with you. That's a good point, Jenny, that you brought up. Corey, I'm the only one who hasn't spoke up. I really, I think it's smart that we come up with legislation that we all agree on as a council. And to do that, if we need to bring in outside groups, that's super important, especially we're reacting to what the outside groups wanted with police reform. But Corey, I got a fast question for you. We don't have legislative counsel right now, but the commissioner, public safety commissioner that we approved in the last budget, do we have to keep that? Is that something, that position kind of throws a monkey wrench in the whole process that we're working on right now. So I'm just wondering, legally, is that something that, if with local law C, could we eliminate that position?
I think we could rename it. That's
well, you can rename
silly
it, but
name
because
for
the
it.
council hasn't acted, so the mayor just put it in her budget, right? The council hasn't created, we're legislators, so we can create departments where we can figure that out. But the mayor felt like, okay, this person needed to be there to do some of this work. And what it did was it led to people calling and saying, wait a minute, that's the same office that we're trying is going to oversee this process again. That is not what citizens called for, right? And so I think the mayor's office put that there as a person who was going to be overseeing this, the recommendations, which that's something people didn't want. They wanted a separate entity doing that and making sure that work gets done and making sure it's transparent, because let's be honest, there's a lot of things we're finding out that they're doing because we're moving on this legislation. Oh, we're already doing that. So why weren't we told earlier? Why are we getting, oh, we're already doing that? Really? So that is the process of what citizens have felt, and council members felt the same way. Like, we're like, oh, we didn't know that. So Tom, I guess to answer your question, we have to figure it out. The council will have to figure out what
it's a part-time position. And that's the biggest, and for public safety, to have somebody who's a public safety commissioner part-time in a city of our size and with the number of crime. I see Jack shaking his head, but do you have anything to say, Jack? I'm sorry.
No, I think it should be a full-time job. If we're going to go through this whole ordeal to have a commissioner and, reform our police department, I think it should be a 40, 50-hour job. That's just my take.
Yeah. Okay. And I see Megan. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Corey. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, and I think, that's the discussion, right? When you want to talk about a public safety department, that's the discussion that goes under that discussion.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. Megan, Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of throw out there. So, Ithaca is doing a very kind of similar, or is in the process of going through a really similar process. One of the things that they did, I think, probably pretty intentionally to get away from how public safety is defined under second-class cities law, and the roles and responsibilities, is that they are calling it a community safety department as opposed to a public safety department, which sort of gets away from the language and responsibility that is implied in the overarching state law around public safety. And that is something that we may want to consider, is a slight tweak to the language that pulls us out of, and again, I would go back to corporation counsel or our personal attorney to kind of, because I think one of my other concerns with the way this was structured is that it didn't quite line up and spell out the authority as juxtaposed with the authority under second class cities law as well. So that may be a suggestion that we might want to look at as my only piece to
Megan-
that. And then the second piece is my understanding with that part-time commissioner position is that it also had to do with discipline.
Yeah.
And allowing us to bring discipline in-house. And I think that that is also a critical part of police reform, whether the police union likes it or not. Moving away from the current arbitration structure that we have that has resulted in us having to hold on to certain individuals that we don't want on the police force any longer. You know, getting rid of that role may impact our ability to bring those discipline cases back under our roof is the
Yep.
only other thing.
Well, I
think
want to
we need
address that,
really
Megan,
consider.
because, you know, one can argue that if you go to trial and you have your attorney comes in and defends you and you're found innocent, and then the government says, well, we don't want people found innocent. We're going to make it that, you know, there is no trial, that you're arrested, you're guilty. I mean, there's
Yeah, but
a thing
our-
called
our-
due process that I'm very concerned about.
arbitration is a little bit different though, Tom. So an arbitrator can sustain the city's charges and still determine that the penalty should not be termination. It can give a lesser penalty. And we don't necessarily have a system by which arbitrators have any commensurate experience or knowledge of policing involved in how they're deciding cases. And so, you know, you
I've-
can have the charges sustained. We can be found liable in civil court for something that we don't win in arbitration.
Okay,
in
but
the
do
way
we
that-
have the numbers, Megan? I mean, do we know, is this a problem? Are we
It is-
trying to
my
solve it?
understanding from talking with the city attorney's office is that they have really significant concerns over the arbitrator that's currently assigned to the city is some white guy from Vermont.
And yep. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, Ms. Key.
No, go ahead,
Sorry.
no, go ahead, that's
Well,
good.
go ahead, Corey.
No,
I want to
mean,
know what's going
and
on, but go ahead.
And it's just not, you know, I've heard citizens say the same thing. I have. It's been years I've heard it. So thank you, Megan, for reminding me. That was the other reason for putting that public safety commission in that budget. I've heard that, so I definitely agree with Megan. We have to really look at it because that is one of the, you know, that was one of the complaints I've heard. And this is just not the first time I'm hearing it. I've heard it from many people about the arbitration process. So
Who
Yeah.
appoints the, I'm sorry, Jay, I just
Oh.
wanted to get more
So-
information, drill down.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Sure.
because this was a big part of the budget process. So it's, and Megan's absolutely correct that, and there has been a need for this role. The big issue with the public safety commissioner is the title of it. And we really, because what you think a public safety commissioner is not what this role is. And the reason for starting it at part-time is because they really did not think that with this arbitration, that there would be enough work for full-time. So it was modeled off of, I believe Schenectady has one, and they have a retired judge come in for it. So that was the appeal of doing part-time, because you can have someone that has actually been a judge that's gone through this process that might be interested in doing this part-time, but would not be interested in full-time. And there's also not necessarily the work for full-time. So it could eventually be brought up to full-time. The reason why we talked about creating the public safety department with that is because we council approves commissioners, and Richard was absolutely correct with this, we would then have to approve this public safety commissioner. So the whole point of creating the department had nothing to do with this specific legislation, but really just had to do with allowing the council to approve this role. And it's something where what it would be great is if we could just come up with a different title for it, because it is a terrible title for, it just doesn't make sense for what it is. I mean, it would be like calling, I don't want to call myself queen of the council because that's silly, but like, it's like coming up with some ridiculous title that just doesn't make sense for the role. So it is potentially a very valuable role that we should consider keeping in, but we absolutely should give it a different title. And I don't know what that title should be, but it absolutely should not be Public Safety Commissioner, because everybody has a different expectation of that. When you hear commissioner, you think of department head, you think of someone in a managerial position. You don't think of somebody that is adjudicating different disciplinary processes, and that's what their main role would be. And it is a valuable role and it is a necessary role, but it needs maybe a different title. So
Yes,
I think it would be helpful for our own things if we could all kind of, maybe even we can come up with a name for it and start calling it that, so we can just kind of sweep that away and not.
And a job
even-
description. And a
Yes.
job description, because I think the job description is important.
Well, I still got a question, and I'm trying to drill down because I need to understand, as a council member and as the public safety chair, there was a statement made that the current arbitrator has a problem. So my question is, who appoints the arbitrator? Where does the arbitrator come from? And because we have a bad arbitrator, do we change? I don't even know how many years it was on. So I'm going to let you.
Yeah, I think
continue,
you're
Megan.
gonna
Go
have
ahead.
to, I think you're gonna have to talk to Corp Counsel about that process, because it's usually, you usually have to reach a mutual decision between the union and the employer about who like a designated arbitrator is going to be. And I just know from having sort of ad hoc conversations about this issue with our city attorneys that they've been unable to get that to change, and that based upon litigation on this issue and the way that the courts have interpreted how discipline cases can be handled, specifically with regard to policing, this is a solution to moving away from that arbitrator system. And I also just want to point out to you all, as we're having this discussion about the title may be very specific to what we legally have to call this person in order to resolve that issue over discipline. So before we get too far into the weeds around that particular position, I think that we again need to have the attorneys kind of go over what's currently in the hopper in terms of the appellate court cases that have come down on this issue, and where those cases are if they're wending their way through the federal courts.
What bothers me, if we're going to talk to the city attorneys, we also need to talk to the unions involved.
Absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
that's one of the reasons why I posed this question to the union guy from APD who was here, I think, at our first meeting. I was like, my understanding is this, and what are your feelings on that are? And I do believe that everyone's entitled to a due process system. And I don't think that this necessarily gets away from that. But it does, I think, put us in a better position to have somebody who really understands what we are doing in terms of policy and procedure in our department that is different from the rest of the world, that really needs to be enforced in order for us to move forward. And I don't think that we necessarily are going to see the change that we want to see if we're still functioning in an old school disciplinary system.
That's right.
Well, and again, I just want to make sure, if right now, currently, the unions have a say, to pick a neutral arbitrator, I guess, that they also will have a say to who if it's public safety commissioner or whoever in that position.
I
Go ahead.
think the courts determine, so police policing is a little bit different in New York State, and the courts determined that they don't necessarily have a right to arbitration. They have to have the right to grieve discipline, but it can be either through an arbitrator or through what is designated as a public safety commissioner. And that's sort of like the legal piece that I want answered, is what specifically did those appellate court decisions say we have to have, and what would be the process between the city and PBA on this issue.
And fire department too, because, and I don't know what other agencies that would be covered under this with arbitration. So that's something that we definitely need to, get information on and to address. So I really appreciate it that we're talking about it. Yeah, go ahead, Corey, I see you.
Well, Tom, I just wanted to reiterate, Ms. Keegan stated it, but I did ask the officer or whoever his title was, did he support having this public? Because I told him to never put in budget, and he said yes. So for the record, that's on record. I asked him, and he said yes. So when we don't need to bring him in to say it again. He already said it.
Is that on record? It's like he did it at a common council
No, he did
meeting?
at the public safety. No, our first public
Oh.
safety committee meeting.
Okay.
When we had him in, he spoke, and I asked him that question directly.
What
I said
about
the
the fire
mayor's-
department?
I said the mayor's put the public safety commissioner's title in her budget. Bye-bye. Do you agree with that? He said yes. I said okay. It was a simple question.
Well, we didn't ask the fire department either, though. I mean, and they would be impacted also. They don't have as many cases, but, I just want to make sure that for every action, there's a reaction. So, but, okay, we've gotten a lot. Just looking at the time. So I think I went through what everybody thought. So do you want to bring up, can we look at, we want to move forward. So I guess one of the things is we want to pull out the public safety department is what I've heard during this meeting. So do we want to bring up and look at what sections that will impact of the of local law C? Do you want to bring it up, Ethan, for us? Yeah, it's
Do you
both.
know what section it is?
No, so just scroll down slowly and everybody keep your eyes on it. If you see it jump out, let us know.
I think you have, so if you go, stop Ethan, if you go to the first paragraph, we deleted the Department of Public Safety, and then see up here in section 1.
Oh, yeah.
And then if you scroll down to the next page, Ethan, that last paragraph, or that first paragraph, last sentence, is where we start talking about Department of Public Safety. So it includes this section, that last sentence.
Yes, you're right.
And then keep going. I think it picks up again in this section 4269, legislative intent. And it starts with the definitions.
That's commission.
In which you're like actually defining what it is and what it's going to do.
Yeah, but they don't mention, I don't see it mentioning a department yet, so.
I think because we call it a commission.
Yeah, here it is here on 4271A. There's a statement.
So, and again, Corey, I would say, like, I don't have an issue with us having a community board in here. My bigger issue with this community board was their authority over the commissioner.
Yes. Well, I want to see if that was in the original, you guys can go through this, but there is original, the original law about the commission. So I'll just pull from my original law that we presented last year, because a lot of stuff was added when JR was here. JR, went through, said, well, we have to add this if they're going to be under public safety department. We have to. I'm like, really? So a lot of this stuff was added with the public safety department. I can't remember the exact conversation, but that's why I'm just going to pull what the original law was before we added the public safety department to merge it all together.
Because I think, Corey, it flips back and forth between talking
Yes,
about the department and the
exactly right.
commission throughout the
Yep.
document.
Yep.
And
So-
I don't have an issue with the board. I have an issue with the commissioner being at the will of a board that's not duly elected by the people. I just want to make that distinction for y'all. Because I think that takes away our responsibility to the people and the mayors.
Kelly, is this something we can ask Brett to fix? I'm just not sure without, with not having our own
No.
legislative council.
No, we can amend it. I mean, it's not an issue. We'll submit the original local law, right? And because that original local law doesn't have the public safety department in it. So this law, local law C, will be amended, right? To take that out. And then you just work off the original local law C.
So do we offer up, I just want to go over the procedure, at a committee meeting,
Yes.
we will say we want to amend it.
Yep.
And then do we need to vote at that moment on the amendment, or?
Yeah, you'd vote on the committee's agreement of it, but of course, the actual amendment portion takes place in our meeting,
The
our
council
meeting.
meeting.
The
Yes.
the committee's making the recommendation.
Okay.
And
support it.
we've heard the committee's recommendation would be to pull out the public safety department. So you would pull that out, and then at the next meeting, you would reintroduce the local law and say as amended, because we have amended it.
Okay, do we need to change that? But the amendment itself, we can hold off till we're ready to pass it on council, right? I mean, while we're working on it in committee, I just want to make sure that we're working on something that we're allowed to, in the next, whatever number of meetings we're gonna
Mhm.
need. Go ahead.
Yeah, you'll be working on your
Yeah.
local law C.
I guess the question would be is going back to the first iteration of this law. And of course, at the end of the budget session last year, Richard added with that law, the Department of Public Safety or what have you. We got to see how they're interwoven
That's it.
in this, because we're basically trying to peel away part of it. And so, but of course, none of us should do it. We'll get Brett to take a look at it.
But I can do it, brother. I have the original law, so I can just go through it and
Okay.
peel out
Okay.
what wasn't originally there. Because when anything that wasn't originally there is the public safety department stuff.
Right, but my question is it as simple as just eliminating some areas, or I mean, with the way the law works and language works, if one thing changes, something else may have had to change, and
Mhm.
I don't think it's probably as simple as just striking stuff out. There might have again, you're one of
It
those
is.
the
Yes.
minds behind it. So however
And
you
when
want to do
we
it.
had, like I said, me and JR had that conversation. When he was putting it, he said, well, if you do the public safety department, this would fall on the public safety department. So this will go here. I'm like, really? So there's those things I remember, and I have, I have notes and stuff like that, because how he crafted it and stuff. So
Okay. Yeah.
So we're trying to schedule another meeting, Corey. Is that something that you would have for the next meeting?
yes, I don't
that
see
we
what,
work
yes.
on?
Mhm.
Okay.
And Tom, I think Alfredo had his hand up before
I'm
we
sorry.
all started talking.
Well, when they put up the thing, I missed it. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead,
that's
Alfredo.
okay. I was just gonna say, is it possible for you to email us all the original document?
Mhm.
Just so we can start reviewing that now, because
Yep, the original law, yep.
So because that's basically what's going to be after it's decoupled. That's
Mhm.
basically what it's going to be, what we'll be working on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think this is going to be a major impact on local law C with the budget issues that we talked about in the beginning. Will people see? Do we want to have Gabriella bring in the collaborative, the police reform collaborative for next meeting also? Is that a good step to move forward?
Tom,
I agree.
there's like 50 members on the collaborative. It doesn't work like that.
Is
So
there a
you
Thank you,
have
chair?
Jenny.
to break it
Thank
up
you.
into pieces. So you really need to break it up into pieces and do the subgroups. It does not work to have all of them in at once. And you could have, like, there were co-chairs to it. You could reach out to the co-chairs and perhaps ask them to come in, or even send them an email and say, hey, would you be willing to weigh in on the best way to do this process to involve the collaborative members? But there's a lot of people.
Yeah, because each collaborative group had a different focus, right? So I think we should look at which group had to focus on something like this and call in those people, because it was part of a recommendation. So you see, okay, what was your intent on this recommendation? I think that's where I would start, because each collaborative group dealt separately. Some dealt with policies and procedures, some dealt with oh my goodness, discipline.
Mine was recruitment. Mine was
recruitment,
recruitment and sustaining them on, I do think it would be great though, if Tom, if you would reach out to the, even the full committee, but to reach out to the kind of, but you've been in touch with Ava Ayers. She was fantastic through the whole thing. So
Yeah.
it might be a good idea to kind of like just touch base with a couple of people that were on it and ask the best way to move forward, or their recommendations to move forward.
Hey, Ethan, can you take down the local law C so I can see everybody? Thanks.
Ava was a great suggestion, because Ava helped craft part of this local law as well. So perfect.
Yeah, I'll send you
Tom, I
an
have-
email. and see-
Incredible on the whole collaborative.
Perfect.
Such a resource.
Yes, she was. Love her to death. I told her that when I said thank you.
Jack has his finger up. I see it.
So I think Corey kind of answered this. Like, you're bringing up people that helped draft this law. Can you inform us who those people were, or like, was it like 10 people, 5 people? Who were they?
It was members from the Center for Law and Justice. It was Ava. She was a part of that group. It was Labor. Reverend Iberman was part of that group. The NAACP. Member from the CPRB, Nairobi. She had sent representation when she couldn't make it. JR was part of there as our counsel, so he could get, what the gist of the language we were looking for. 2 ACPAC members at the time. It was the chair of ACPAC was at the meeting, and along with Carol G. Washington. So those are the people who said they wanted to see reform, but those are also the people who said they wanted to see it just not fall in the hands of the administration or police to do these reforms, to make sure they happen. And that's how this came about.
Okay.
And Ava was there to help with language and, because she was she's part of collaborative. So she knew some of the intent of what was talked about and what people wanted to see. So some of the language was put into that.
Yeah, she was good with the CPRB. I talked to her almost an hour, and we still have issues with that we need to take care of, by the way, but one issue at a time.
Yes. So these are folks who were under collaborative, who part of ACPAC. And that's why when we look at ACPAC has no teeth. It has once again, it was not constituted by law by this council. It was a police chief saying, hey, council members, can you give somebody who can come and we can have conversations? But they had there was no accountability to ACPAC by the police department. They didn't have to be accountable. They can ask for stuff. If the chief didn't give it to them, there's nothing they could do. because it
And-
wasn't constituted.
If it's like, I think it would be great if this process would kind of lead to possibly a different version of ACPAC, because we have some people in ACPAC who are working really, really
That's right.
hard. But as
I
Corey
would
said,
think some of them would want
it's
to be on the
not
commission.
necessarily, I think that there's, we're not necessarily, I think there's a lot of, we don't really know exactly what to go for with it. I think that some different structure and some different things, especially because again, like we have people that are really working so hard on it, but it's also really hard to get people on it. So I know although I will say, one of the at-large people is from my ward, who works very hard on it, but my ward spot is open, and I've had people come in and leave, and it's very difficult to get people to serve on it. And I think it would be a lot easier if we were able to go through this process and give it like a different meaning, a different charge through it. It just, as Corey said, I think going through the process might be a helpful way to actually find a way to kind of bring it into something new or a new life that would allow the people that are working so hard on it now to maybe get some relief, because we could get some more people in there.
I've always envisioned ACPAC members would want to serve. And also, we did have to help craft this. I can't be remiss. We did have a law student, first year law student, who was helping out, doing a lot of the work to help this as well with the, so it definitely was an effort that was, that was tedious, but, we tried to put something in front of the council, and now I think we're at that stage where we bring some of those people back and really have move forward. So.
I see Jack and then Megan. Go ahead.
I just had a follow-up question. So if this does go through, Corey, I guess my question is, do we really need ACPAC still, or should we repeal it?
Well, I think if the commission is formed, I think that's a question the commission could view, right? Because there might be some functions commission says, well, if we had this piece, then we could constitute ACPAC. Like I said, I view the commission as saying, okay, this is what can help further this reform. So I don't see ACPAC as being eliminated. If it is, I could see those members wanting to be on the commission.
Megan?
Or the commission finding a way for them to function.
Just a couple of suggestions. If we are sort of truly in a position where we're concerned about documentation, policies, procedures, cooperation, we may want to pull some of the language that exists in like the Medicaid regs and social services law around records access for this commission. And if you would like me to draft that for you, Corey, I'm happy to do that and give you the actual open plate, boilerplate language for that and where it's referenced in the law, because I think it might be very helpful to be very explicit as to what level of cooperation is needed between what it is that we're doing within this legislation and the rest of the city. And then I think the second piece that I would love to see, and I think I made a suggestion in this, is really the kind of ongoing data metrics and ongoing communication with the council around helping us to sort of put together and craft the things so that they're legally implemented. Because as you said, some of the history of police reform in the city really hasn't had any legal basis really to enforce that happened. So those would be two things that I sort of would suggest perhaps being added in, so that we're constantly kind of evaluating the progress that we've made once this is complete, so that we can kind of look at what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and tweak as we go along. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Corey.
You're muted.
Talking, and I'm off there. Oh my goodness, this is bad. Sorry about that. I thought
That's
I was
okay.
talking. Yeah, I mean, anything where we know what we need to make the language stronger on the intent is always welcome. As long as the language is strong on the intent, I mean, no one says no to that. So yes, I agree.
Okay, folks, it's 6:45, and I'm trying to keep these meetings that they're not excruciating long and that we deal with stuff. So if there's nothing else major, I just want to go over. Ethan's going to try to schedule our next meeting. And I want to, like I had said, I want to make sure we try to do it a day where Sonia can join us and with our work responsibilities. She was excused, the last 2 times, but she is part of the committee, and I want to make sure. And as Ginny pointed out, she's the finance chair, and it'd be good to have her involved. Not that we're going to deal with the finances right away, but at least she understands what's going on with that. She did say she'll watch the recording, so she keeps up with it. So my assignment is to get Ava. Gabriella, you're going to try to get some folks from the collaborative on for us also.
Sure, I can work on that.
Okay. Is there anything else we want to do? And Corey's going to work on getting the taking out the public safety department, and so we can start looking at the changes that makes, and actually start wordsmithing some. Is there anything else that I missed that we need to do for the next meeting? Jack? Go
Are
ahead.
we
Jack.
gonna offer public comment again?
Yeah, today was offered.
I know, that's what I'm asking. We're gonna offer it
Yeah,
again.
for now on, unless people come to
No,
me
I
and
agree.
say, yeah, we won't do it. I see your hand up, Gabriella. Gabriella?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying the
It's
unmute
okay.
button. How did we want to organize this? We can talk offline if that's easier, but as Ginny mentioned, there's many different groups within the collaborative. I can connect the powers that be, both in public safety and on the council, with the heads of those, but I think we should have a plan. It shouldn't just be like connecting the collaborative with the council. If we were to invite them to meetings, I think we should have a more organized space.
Yeah, and having 50 people come in, that just won't work. I think, if we can limit to a certain number, 4 or 5 would be what I was thinking.
Tom, maybe if you
Go ahead.
started with Ava and had her recommend different people from the collaborative, that might be a
Even
good
a better
place to
idea.
start.
Okay.
And then I have all the contact information because so we can certainly share that along, but I think that might be, she was very involved. And I think she might have some good recommendations.
Okay. Great suggestion. I really appreciate the help.
Yeah, it sounds like Ginny has all the contacts, so I don't mind. As long as Ginny, it sounds like you are interested in taking over that. If you have the contacts and you understand the leaders of each of the subgroups within the collaborative, then please, by all means, if you want to connect Tom with those people, go for it.
I think though we'll bring in Ava first and see who she recommends, and then we can move forward from that point. I will try to continue doing these meetings virtual till May 15th, and hopefully it'll be extended, I think, more. For me, committee meetings are a lot easier when they're virtual like this. We can share documents. It's just a lot easier. And it's easier to get public comment too. It's not, people have to travel and stuff, but we'll have to see what the governor proposes, and we'll move forward till then. Does anybody have any other final comments before we say goodnight? If not, thank you all. I really, really appreciate it. This is monumental, and I can't wait to be at the end of the road. But sometimes they say you got to smell the roses along the way. So let's continue to do that. And it's a pleasure working with everybody, and I really mean that. Thank you. Good night.
I make a motion to close.
Motion
Second.
closed. Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
See you later. Thank you, Jeff.
Good night, everybody.